of Orthodox spirituality.
Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.
Hello, dear listeners. We are continuing to read from the book With Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, the first volume in the series Spiritual Counsels by Saint Paisios. There will be a return to tradition. In the future, people will appreciate how Christians today preserved the honor, faith, and grandeur of the Church. There will be a return to tradition. You'll see. The same thing happened with iconography. There was a time when they could not understand Byzantine art. They tried to tear down frescoes using axes to remove the old plaster and replace it with new plaster so as to paint Renaissance-like icons. Now, after all these years, they recognize the value of Orthodox iconography. Axe-stricken frescoes are uncovered and restored by people who are not even pious or believe in God. The same thing will happen with so many things that are considered useless and thrown away today. Slowly, there will come a time when people will look for them. Have you noticed how Byzantine music is taking its rightful place? Even young children are now studying it. A few years ago, it was difficult to find people that were trained in Byzantine music. Now that little children have learned it, many wonder at it. The turns of Byzantine music are so delightful. The elder used the word gyrίσματα to refer to the stylistic turns, that is, the vocal melodic patterns or variations of Byzantine music, which are usually indicated with the characters of quality or expression and which contribute to the adornment and beauty of melodies. When it is authentic Byzantine, the turns are so beautiful, so sweet. Some are fine, like the songs of nightingales. Others are soft, like lapping waves, and yet others are full of grandeur. They all convey and stress the divine meanings. It is hard to find chanting that has these qualities. Most chanters only go halfway. They chant in a truncated, formulaic way. They leave gaps, holes, and worst of all, they chant without inflection. It makes me wonder whether the accent marks have been left out of their books. It's like modern grammar that has done away with accent marks. There are those who do not make use of tones when they read. No matter what they say, it sounds the same, as if the words have been steamrolled flat. Panizo, panizo, you hear them chant. Pani and zo are notes used in Byzantine music. They chant, but nothing comes out of it. Some stress syllables without emotion and end up shrieking. Others stress every syllable the same way, as if they are hammering nails rather than chanting. It's true. Their chanting is either too harsh or too flat. It does not move you. It does not alter you spiritually. By contrast, authentic Byzantine music pacifies and soothes the soul. True, authentic chanting is the result of the overflow of the inner spiritual state. It is divine bliss. In other words, the heart is delighted with Christ and filled with joy. It converses with God. When the chanter becomes part of the chant, he is altered, in the good sense of the word, and so are those who listen to him. Some years ago, an older chanter visited the holy mountain, and he became a laughingstock. The fathers there chanted in the traditional way, so they invited him to chant with them. But he could not sing the turns. He did not know how. The fathers, the Aiorites, knew them from tradition. He started having questions. Others did too. A good concern took hold of them, and so they started researching, studying, listening to old traditional masters, and in the end, they discovered how turns had been used in the past. When the Turks arrived in Asia Minor, they found Byzantine music and adopted it. This is why there is something about Turkish amanades that are so moving to us. And we have this saying, sing Turkish, speak French, and write Greek. An amane is a slow, mellow song from Anatolia, which often repeats the word aman, an exclamation suggestive of pain, anguish, and suffering. I am not saying that all Turks sing this way or have great voices, but when they sing, they put their heart into it. They sing with longing, gaimo, and emotion. There are Greeks who have no idea that the amanades are of Byzantine origin, and they say that our Byzantine music was influenced by Turks. But the Turks, when they came from the depths of Asia, had neither music nor anything else, and so they borrowed the tones of Byzantine music. Yeroda, why do Catholics find the organ so spiritually satisfying? Why? Popularization, that's the answer. Do you remember those Catholic nuns in France who on Easter were singing Christ is risen while dancing in a modern way with an icon? In their minds, they were celebrating Easter. Their abbess was processing while carrying the icon. Do you see where all the alterations have gotten them? I once heard a young monk chanting a doxology, and it sounded a bit strange. Wait a minute, I thought to myself. What is it that he is chanting? So I asked him, who composed this doxology? Petros the Peloponnesian, he replied, but I have made some corrections. You have made corrections? I asked. Well, yes, don't I have the right to do that? He answered. Sure, you have the right to compose your own doxology, I said to him, but you don't have the right to destroy someone else's. Here, he had made changes, and then he would have claimed, it's from the holy mountain. Much care is necessary. We should not dilute what we inherit from tradition. If he wants to, let him compose his own chants and sign his name. He has that right. But it is irreverent to take old chants and dilute them. It's like someone with no knowledge of iconography trying to restore an old icon. He is free to paint his own icon, but not to destroy someone else's. The world cannot stand without faith. They try to abolish religion, because they believed that it causes problems. Now they are beginning to realize that without faith, man knows no restraint and becomes a beast. He cannot stand without ideals. A journalist once visited an old communist politician and asked him, "What must our politicians do today to succeed? And what must they avoid if they don't want to fail?" And he answered, "We failed because we went after the church." The communists, in other words, who do not believe in God, who have neither a materialistic interest in religion nor spiritual aspirations, realized that they cannot go against God. In some parts of Serbia, this was said in June of 1985, they have started building churches because according to statistics, where there are churches, there are fewer cases of mental illness, lower crime rates, and so on. They don't believe in God, but they would rather have churches than prescribe mental health medications. Even Ceausescu, the Romanian dictator, a shameful man who preached against Christianity and called it the opiate of the people, used to say that Christians are good people. That was because they had restraint and did not create trouble, whereas those who did not believe would go on a rampage. Russia will give us many saints. People are now turning against communism. And just look at how the communists try to justify it all. Lenin and Marx agreed with the ideas of Christ, but they did not understand his spirit fully, and this is why they committed all these crimes. They are saying this because Christians are up in arms. We want to return to our tradition, to our Orthodox faith. And because they cannot restrain the public, they have to agree. Let's go back to our tradition. And we are supposed to believe that everything they did during the revolution was because they had not understood properly the spirit of Christ's teachings. A day will come when even the faithless among those who govern will realize that if there is no faith, this world will not stand. And they will then require people to believe to maintain order. In the future, you will be sent to prison if you miss a day's prayer. You will have to report on whether or not you have prayed to those in power. In this way, things will eventually come around. We must hand down a good tradition. Yeroda, why is it that in some parts of Greece, people are really good? Well, it is probably because good people had lived there and left a good legacy, and others are now carrying on with this good tradition. It's not because the soil produces good people. When a certain town or region creates a good tradition, or even a bad one, that is what is carried on. In Epirus, there was a village near the Albanian border where the villagers attended every single service, Vespers, the Divine Liturgy, even Apodipno. It was, how does one say this, a heavenly life. They lived in heaven in this life, and they will live in heaven in the next. They benefited not only themselves, but they also benefited future generations by having established a good order, a good line of continuity. When new generations are born into a good tradition, it will remain a good tradition. Close by was another village where people had the habit of stealing. The village had only produced one priest, and even he was stealing icons from the church. There was nothing wrong with the soil. The villagers had bad habits. This bad course was handed down, and it is this bad tradition that continues. It will take hard work for a good tradition to take place there. You see, when someone has a bad character, people will try and persuade you that he is not really from their town. They want to know where his family originated. But when someone is a saint, everybody rushes to claim him as their own. Take Saint Cosmas Estolos. Even though he came from the southern part of Greece, people here in Epirus call him an Epiroti because his father was born at the Gramenochoria villages of Epirus. The saint had no say. I once met a family man who used to move one of his fingers nervously every time he spoke. His children would do the exact same thing when they spoke. Children will imitate their parents' habits. They will copy them exactly. It is important to copy only what is good to avoid perpetuating bad habits. I remember a man who had entered an Idiorhythmic monastery to become a monk, but he did not feel at peace there. "Stay a while, my son, and things will change," his elder said to him. And his son replied, "Yeroda, how will things change? The disciple of elder so-and-so is exactly like his elder, and the disciple of that other elder is also exactly like him. How can things ever change?" When there is a bad habit in a monastery or in a monastic community, and young monks do not have the good kind of concern and only copy what they find in place, they end up perpetuating what is wrong. If, on the other hand, the good concern exists, then it's possible for a bad situation to change and become good. Thus, both good and bad habits can be inherited. I have realized that all the things that have come down to us, either from the fathers or from the Tipika, the ancient rules and practices, are like leftovers from the grape harvest. We must be careful to save some yeast. As Christians, this is our duty. We do not have the right to pass down a bad tradition. A few years ago, in Geneva, there was a gathering of theologians and university professors in preparation for a synod. This was said in 1992. They decided to abolish the fasts for Christmas and the Holy Apostles, as well as 2 weeks from the Great Lent fast, because most people do not observe them. Some professors from Greece were also at this conference. When they came and told me, I was very upset. I was beside myself. Don't you realize what you are doing? If someone is sick, he is allowed to eat. He will not be given a rule, canon. If someone is not sick but breaks the fast out of weakness, all he needs to do is to humble himself. "Forgive me, Lord," he should say. "I have sinned." Christ will not hang him. If he is not sick, however, he should not break it. Those who don't care about fasting are free to not fast. So there is no problem. But if we do away with the fasts in order to please those who don't care to keep them, how will we know how the next generation will be? Maybe they will be better than us and better able to strictly observe the fasts. What right do we have to do away with these fasts which pose no problem? Catholics only fast for 1 hour before Holy Communion. Are we going to follow in that spirit, blessing our weaknesses and our falls? We don't have the right, because of our weaknesses, to make Christianity to our measure. It is important to keep the order of the Church, even for the few who can observe its traditions. If a person is sick and away from home, he should eat where others cannot see him and be scandalized. He can eat his yogurt, for example, at home. A man said to me, "That is hypocritical. Why don't you go and sin in the town square in order to be more honest?" I replied. You see how the devil puts things to them? We want to create an orthodoxy according to our own standards and to interpret the Fathers and the Gospel as we please. Today, when we have so many highly educated Orthodox men and women, orthodoxy should shine. Look at what St. Nicodemus the Agorite accomplished. He wrote so many homilies and books, all the synaxaria of the saints. He knew entire libraries by heart, without photocopy machines and computers. We must do our best to be true Christians. Then we will acquire a spiritual sense. We will care for orthodoxy and for our country, and feel the need to fulfill our obligations as Greeks. We will be interested and concerned and pray for their good. However, if others have to tell us, now be interested in this, now in that, and so on, it would be as if we were square wheels that must be constantly pushed in order to progress. The point is that we must push ourselves from within. Then we will roll nicely like a round wheel. And if someone becomes a good Christian, he will push himself from within, and then God will inform him about more things than those who study. He will know not only what others write, but also what they are thinking of writing. Divine enlightenment will come such that all his activities will be enlightened. We have no right to eliminate the inheritance that Christ bequeathed us. God will hold us accountable. This small nation of ours believed in the Messiah, and we were granted the blessing to enlighten the whole world. The Old Testament was translated into Greek 250 years before the coming of Christ. Think of how the first Christians suffered. Their lives were constantly in peril. And now, when it is safe to enlighten other nations, we are so indifferent. Today, we owe the peace we have to those who came before us. Do you know how many of them sacrificed their lives? Without their sacrifice, we would have nothing. I can't help but make this comparison. How is it that then, although their lives were in danger, people held onto their faith? And how is it that today, when there is absolutely no pressure or any risk, we lose our faith and put it on the same level with others? Those nations who have never lost their freedom cannot understand. May God protect us from the defilements of barbarian invasions, I tell them. Why, they reply, what's going to happen to us? Just listen to them. You should not be lost people. And yet that's how many think today. Give them money and cars, and they will not care about faith, honor, or even their own liberty. We Greeks owe our Orthodox faith to Christ and to the holy martyrs and fathers of our Church. We owe our liberty to the heroes of our country who shed their blood for us. During our times, we must honor this holy heritage and keep it alive and not destroy it. It will be such a shame if our nation were to disappear. What we are seeing now is similar to what happens before a war. A draft goes in effect, and personal letters are sent out. God is also sending personal letters to gather together people that will help save His creature. God will not abandon us, but we must do everything that is in our power. And for what is beyond our abilities, we should pray to Him for help. Dear listeners, we have come to the end of Volume 1, With Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, in the series Spiritual Counsels by Saint Paisios. We will continue with another reading of Orthodox Spirituality by Saint Paisios. Thank you for listening. Be well.
Readings of Orthodox Spirituality.
Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.